Greetings, my name is Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, or TPhGames as my little games channel here is called, and today I want to discuss some news that I found interesting from the past few days. Let us start with the first one. Note from the future. Originally I planned to have a Cyberpunk 2077 news section in this video, mainly talking about the big 2.1 update for the game, but it got too long and I moved it into a separate video, which is already released when the patch came out a few days ago. So these are the leftover news. Then the GTA 6 trailer dropped, I covered that here as well, and then also the Game Awards happened. I also watched them in live stream and so on, so this video got delayed further and further, and that is why these news are a little bit older or feel a bit out of time, just in case you wonder. But let us start with Elden Ring. As you are probably aware, there's a new DLC/expansion announced called Shadow of the Erdtree. And recently, the promotion and community manager of Elden Ring, Yasuhiro Kitao, was asked about it in Japan. There's a Japanese interview, I'll link it in the description, and I used DeepL to translate it, but also asked ChatGPT and some other AI translators and Google Translate. They all came up with kind of this translation. We will talk about DLC another time. It's still some way off, but progress is going well. Like in Bloodborne, we are also working on new battles and new characters. You can look forward to something new. So it's still some way off. Sounds not like it will release anytime soon. The rumor is we might see a trailer for this at the Game Awards, which would be pretty awesome, and maybe also a release date. Note from the future, it did not happen. The rumor for the release date previously was that it might come out at the 5th of February 2024. That is in 2 months already, and the statement it's still some way off doesn't really sound like it's coming out in 2 months. So maybe I'm reading too much into it, it's just my interpretation, but it sounds like it might still take some time till it releases. I don't know, it seems very ambitious, like consider how long this is in development. Elden Ring came out February 2022, so this is in development by now almost 2 years, and if they started at least after the release of it, as a result, this must be a very ambitious project. Like, how big is this DLC going to be? Like, it must be absolutely massive by now, except they had a lot of trouble in development, but he also says it's progressing well, so I'm very curious to learn how big this will be. For people wondering, of course, the Souls DLCs were always little expansions for the game and usually considered very good. I think the weakest DLC would be Ashes of Ariandel, and that is also, at least in my opinion, that is also a pretty good DLC still. But he mentions here Bloodborne explicitly. There the DLC was Old Hunters, and that's one of the best DLCs I think FromSoft ever did. And that's kind of encouraging to expect greatness here. My favorite DLC would be the first DLC for the first Dark Souls, which is called Artorias of the Abyss. And that one was ahead of its time, in my opinion, when it comes to some boss designs and so on. It really showed where the journey and further development of future FromSoft games and boss designs will go. It's an impressive DLC, though the entrance was definitely difficult to find. It also had one character or NPC in it called the Marvelous Chester, and his style, how his clothes and so on, was distantly reminiscent of Bloodborne already, and maybe this was something FromSoft was already thinking on in the background. Difficult to tell, but I think it was definitely ahead of its time. Next news is a short one. Resident Evil 4 gets a VR mode at the 8th of December 2023 for PSVR 2. There will also be a demo available at the same day. Of course, VR modes in Resident Evil are nothing new, but it's still nice to have, especially if you consider that it is a free update. If you own Resident Evil 4 Remake on PlayStation, you get this as a free DLC and can try it out if you possess, of course, a PSVR 2. If you don't possess the game, but a PSVR 2, you can also download the demo and play that. I assume it will start and end where the classic Resident Evil 4 Remake demo also starts and ends. So you start at the very beginning of the game, and it ends in the village section, if you know the original game. So short little passage here should give you a good overview of controls and stuff. I hope it's good, but it might also come later for the PC VR headset platforms and so on. That would be awesome, but it seems like Sony definitely has some exclusivity here. Speaking of Resident Evil and Capcom, Capcom confirms more Resident Evil remakes are coming. Not a big surprise considering the success, and they did a fantastic job so far in my opinion. So looking forward to it. The question is just, and this question also goes to people in the comments, what Resident Evil would you like to see as a remake? My choice would be Resident Evil 1 for sure, maybe also Code Veronica. I'm not a fan of Resident Evil 5 and 6. 5 can be kind of fun with its co-op element, but it never really felt like a Resident Evil game, to be honest. And Resident Evil 6, well, let's not talk about that. Though I have to admit, the quality of the remake so far was so good that I could imagine that this development team could even make Resident Evil 5 and 6 into something I personally would like. I know those games also have their fans and so on, but they were never for me, never felt real like Resident Evil games, and I just wish they would go into a completely different direction, but maybe that's just me. Let us move on. Speaking of Capcom, again, Dragon's Dogma 2 got its release date and some trailers. The release date will be the 22nd of March 2024, and the rumors were right. I think there was a PEGI leak or something with this release date, and now it's officially confirmed. It also seems that starting with Dragon's Dogma 2, Capcom will increase the prices for their AAA releases from $60 or euros to $70 on PC. That is very unfortunate to see. We have already seen several other big publishers do this. Now Capcom is also following this trend, which is very unfortunate, especially if you consider how much success they had so far and so on. But it seems they see it as necessary. And I guess, as always, patient gamers have an advantage. So if you have just a big pile of games that you can play and wait, then buy it later when the game is on sale and don't care about the price increase. For those who want to play it on release, though, you have to pay extra, unfortunately. Also, another addition from the future. During the Game Awards 2023, Capcom premiered Monster Hunter Wilds, which will be the next big Monster Hunter, and following, I guess, Monster Hunter World. As a multi-platform Monster Hunter, of course there's Monster Hunter Rise, but that was exclusive for the Switch. And it will come out for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X and PC, and will be out 2025 if it doesn't get delayed further. So it's still relatively far away, and it's interesting to see that they announce it this early. Moving from one big Japanese publisher to another one, to Square Enix, or Square as they were called back in the day, Final Fantasy VII, the original from 1997 with all their combined releases on all kinds of platforms, sells 14.4 million units worldwide. That is from Square Enix 2023 annual report. And Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games of all time, and of course I'm very happy seeing that it was such a huge success and many people could enjoy that game. There's of course also the remake. I'm not the hugest fan of the remake. People who follow my channel or follow me a little bit know that for sure, and I criticized this quite a bit. It does of course some things really, really well, but I think they messed too much with the story for my taste, and usually I'm very focused on game mechanics and gameplay and don't care too much about video game stories, but Final Fantasy VII is kind of the exception. It's one of the few games where I really care about the story, and when I saw how much they changed there and added, in my opinion, nonsensical elements to it, I was not very happy about this. I also thought the level design in many places was not great in that game, so there was definitely room for improvement. Let's hope they improve all of this and these problems and so on in the next part, which will be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I think it's called, and that also comes out pretty soon. So curious where they will go with this. The next news, or rumor I should call it, and I thought about skipping it because it's just that, a rumor, is that Skull and Bones might release in February 2024, the 16th to be precise. And people say that the source behind this is very reliable when it comes to Ubisoft leaks. Another addition from the future, the rumor was true. At the Game Awards, we learned that it will release 16th of February 2024, so the sources were right. Another interesting rumor in this context, and there's no way to know if it's true or not, but that Ubisoft had a deal or contract with the government of Singapore, that is where the game is developed, and in that they have to release it at some point, and this might be the reason why Ubisoft is pushing the game now to release so they can fulfill the contract. It's hard to tell how the game will do. The narrative online is very negative. There was a closed beta recently. The feedback was kind of mixed, but not purely negative for sure. And curious what becomes of this game. It's always a bit unfortunate if you see a game that was anticipated for some time ending up like this and just being in development hell for such a long time. Let us stay in Europe. Since the end of October, it seems, nearly half of CD Projekt is now working on Project Polaris, or potentially The Witcher 4, or whatever the game will be called when it's out. And it's interesting to see that they now pick up some steam there for the development of that game, because there's usually a very long pre-production phase where the lead's working on and prepare everything, and then it goes to alpha and beta and so on. And it's interesting to see how they move around their workforce and on what project they now focus. They also, in this context, said that 2.1 will be the last big update for Cyberpunk 2077. Of course, now with Phantom Liberty out, the big expansion as well. They definitely brought the game to a state where it's very recommendable, in my opinion, at least if you like the subgenre Cyberpunk. It's also the Ultimate Edition was released recently. It is currently on sale as far as I'm aware, so you can get the game at a decent price, and for that it's definitely worth it if you like, as said, the subgenre of Cyberpunk and can also deal with some very depressing endings in the base game, but especially in Phantom Liberty. Keep that also in mind. Also, if you play on PC, you have the option of using mods, and there are tons of them by now over all these years, and most of the mods I use, maybe check my recommended mod list in the description, are updated for patch 2.1 now, or at least work with that, with some exceptions. So it might take some time, and as long as no hotfix comes out, then there should be no problem. There are like mods for quality of life features, for new content, also for adding immersive features and so on. So there's quite a huge selection there. In this context, it is also interesting to discuss if Cyberpunk should have gotten the Best Ongoing Game Award during the Game Awards 2023. In a way, I can understand them getting the award because they did not drop the support, and the game came out in 2020, and we just a few days ago, so in December 2023, we still got an update for the game. That's a very long time to support a single-player game that is not a game as a service. As a result, I can kind of understand them getting this reward for their efforts here. On the other side, I feel like that even the state that they had in patch, let's say 1.5 or 1.6, and 1.6 came out September 2022, so 2 years almost after the release, that was a state where the game should have released in. So in this regard, it feels a bit strange, to be fair. I guess it's the same for No Man's Sky. They also overpromised a lot on the game, and when it came out, they just got a lot of flack for it, and then over time made the game to what they kind of promised, and then also added more to this, and this allowed them to get nominated for these awards. In my opinion, it was justified in this case then. Here in Cyberpunk, you could kind of make a similar argument that with 2.0, and especially with 2.1 now, they definitely added stuff to the game that was most likely not planned to be in the game. You could argue that having a metro system in the game was implied in the E3 2018 trailer already, but I can definitely see that they axe a feature like this during development because it doesn't add too much to the game. It's a cool immersive feature, it's nice to have, but it's not necessary to have. Like previously you could, of course, just fast travel from A to B if you went to a metro station, and that is what I think most people will still use. Maybe they use a metro ride 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and then it gets old pretty fast. As a result, I don't see it really as necessary. And now they added it for the fans or just for fun, just to give you the option to use this, even though you most likely at some point will stop using this feature. But it's nice to have. In my opinion, yes, you can definitely argue for them deserving this reward. If they deserve it more than some other games in this nominated in this category, is a whole different story. But keep in mind that, as far as I'm aware, all the other nominated games were service games, and they get new updates by design. That's what you pay in some form for. Like, you pay a monthly subscription, you pay, I don't know, microtransactions and whatnot. And they make updates and bring new stuff for you to keep interest in the game. That is different for a single-player game like Cyberpunk or other games that were not planned as service games like No Man's Sky and so on. It's very impressive when those games keep dropping updates. Though, to be fair, Cyberpunk was massively successful and also sold millions of copies. It's not just a small indie game. As a result, they had kind of a debt to fix the game and bring it to the standards of the industry, and that took them several years, or let's say 1.5 years, to patch the game where it should be, which definitely shows how much additional development time they would have originally needed. This award kind of concludes their, if you want to call it like this, redemption arc, and let us also hope they learned their lesson from this. I personally was always in a strange spot when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077. Even on release, when I played the game the first time, I liked it a lot, even though it was in a terrible technical state. I liked the well-written characters, I liked Night City, the visual fidelity of the game, the lore, the background. I like sci-fi, I like cyberpunk, and it was like a perfect fit. And also sometimes the great and thought-provoking side missions and story missions in the game as well. There's really some fantastic content in it. But I always felt like I can't recommend this game because of its technical state. So now the technical state is mostly fixed and the game got in a state where I can finally at least recommend it. And the only thing I will definitely say is don't expect GTA in a cyberpunk setting. It is not GTA. It is a more RPG related experience in an open world that is definitely not as vast and sandboxy as a GTA game. But let us move on. An interesting one is that Bethesda has declined to comment when asked about Blade and Xbox exclusivity. So during the Game Awards, Blade was announced, and it's developed by Arkane Studios, Lyon, the Dishonored developers. They are owned by Bethesda, and Bethesda, as we all know, is owned now by Microsoft. And Microsoft, of course, has a great interest in pushing the Xbox brand, and you can do this with exclusive deals. If you want to sell more consoles, you need some killer apps, some good arguments why people should buy an Xbox. And having a big beloved franchise like Blade, potentially by a very competent studio that could turn out into a very great game, being on your console exclusively is of course very awesome for that brand, and so it's a no-brainer, basically. It's interesting, though, that they did not want to comment on that either. It's not decided, and they still think in the background maybe also releasing it as multi-platform, or maybe releasing it as a timed exclusive, and it's not decided yet, so they can't comment on it. Or it's like, well, it will be an exclusive game, we need to push the Xbox brand, and just let this question unanswered as long as possible, and when it releases, they say, surprise, it's an Xbox exclusive, who would have thought? So I think they want to avoid the negativity here after the Game Awards and keep the good impression in people's minds, so they don't comment on this yet. And maybe the only internal question that remains is, will it be a full exclusive or just a timed exclusive? I could imagine that Marvel has for sure an interest that their IPs are available on as many platforms as possible. So Microsoft would for sure have to pay quite a bit for this Xbox exclusivity right now. And of course, Microsoft has the cash to do that. But you always have to ask the question if it's then worse at the end for them. That's hard to tell. So I maybe could imagine it also just being a timed exclusive. But I would definitely expect exclusivity on Blade for sure. And then last, a little spoiler for the Game Awards if you haven't seen them yet. Congratulations to Game of the Year for Baldur's Gate 3. It, in my opinion, definitely deserves this spot, even though I haven't played it much. I got my first impressions of the game, played it for 4 to 6 hours, something like that. And will continue playing when I have more time, but there were so many games this year, and I know that people also will find their way towards Baldur's Gate 3 without me making a review or completing it and making content on it. It's just, I guess, too much Baldur's Gate 3 content right now, but yeah, it definitely deserved it. If I have told you a few years ago that in 2023 a turn-based CRPG will win Game of the Year at the Game Awards, you would have laughed at me. And that is why this game deserves the win here, in my opinion, and every other Game of the Year award it can get. That is for sure. Because I haven't played it enough, my Game of the Year would have been Resident Evil 4, in case you wonder, but that is, as said, only because I haven't spent 200 hours playing Baldur's Gate 3 yet. That will change maybe in the near future, though. Also, please always keep in mind that there are different awards. The, for example, BAFTA awards will be very interesting in the future to see what wins there. I think they are in March again, I'm not sure. And there you have a jury that all actually discusses the nominees and so on, and all games have to be played by the jury and so on. So it's a bit more sophisticated there. This year, the Game Awards award is just a popularity contest, if you want. Like all these outlets just giving their vote for it to work. And the game with the most votes wins, basically. That's how it works. And 10% of the vote is the audience vote. So if games are very close, the audience can make the difference there. And that is how the voting system works. It's not like all these outlets are on a huge Zoom or whatever call and discussing until late in the night their decisions there and going back and forward. That's not how this works. It's just a popularity contest. And that is totally fine, but keep this in mind. There are also other approaches to nominate your Game of the Year. And I think nominating your personal Game of the Year is very important. So let me know what your Game of the Year 2023 was in the comments. This brings us to the end of the video. I hope you found this interesting. I would appreciate feedback because I kind of like making news videos and giving my 2 cents on all kinds of gaming related topics. So let me know if you're interested in more of this. Would be much appreciated. Also, if you're still listening, then maybe hit the subscribe button, press the like button, and leave a comment. Again, thank you people for watching. Shoutouts to all my supporters and so on. See you next time. Goodbye.